All right, hello, and welcome back to Last Epoch University. This is lesson 5, and it's on crafting. Crafting is one of my favorite topics in Last Epoch. I love crafting in this game. I think it's really, really good. It finds a nice balance between being like overly complicated and being overly simple, and being powerful but not crazy powerful to where the loot on the ground does not matter. I just think crafting is in a really good state in this game, and I love talking about it, so that's what we're going to go ahead and do here. In Lesson 5, we are going to go through crafting, what crafting is, what it means for Last Epoch, all the different pieces of it, show you some examples, etc. So let's go ahead and get into it. First off, what can crafting do in Last Epoch? So you have an item, it drops on the ground. It's good, but it could be better. You want to make it better, and you want to use crafting to do that. What can it do for you? So first off, it can add affixes to craftable items. So for example, you have an item that drops with 3 affixes on it, and you like all 3 affixes, but items in LE can have up to 4 affixes, not including sealed ones. So how do you do that? Well, through crafting. Crafting can allow you to choose an affix to put on the item and then add it to it through the crafting panel. It can also improve the tiers of pre-existing affixes. So you have affixes you like, but they're lower tier. You want to get them up to tier 5, maybe it's a tier 2. That's okay, you can do that. That's what crafting's for. It can also improve the roll within a tier. So you get a tier 5 item, or maybe even a tier 6 or tier 7, and you want to get a higher roll on that. So maybe it rolled really low compared to what its roll range is. Let's say its roll range is, I don't know, anywhere from 75 to 100, and you've got a 75. Well, there are things you can do to try and improve that to try to get closer to 100. You can also remove affixes with crafting. You have an affix you don't like on it. We can get rid of that through a couple of mechanisms, actually. One of them more deterministic, or somewhat more deterministic, and one not so, but we can remove them. We can also change affixes, and we can improve implicit rolls. So remember implicits from our previous lesson, or the thing that the item comes with baseline. It's not affixes that are added onto it separately. They're if an axe has a certain amount of damage and maybe melee crit chance on it, that's always got that, but it has roll ranges, and you can improve those through the crafting system. You can also create uniques through this, which all this stuff we'll talk about in a bit, but there's a special crafting material that allow you to make uniques of a certain type so that you can target farm uniques that fall within that type. Okay, what can I craft on? I can do all these things, but what are the items that I can actually do them on? So they are any white, blue, yellow, or purple gear. So remember, purple exalted gear, yellow is your rare, it's got 3 or 4 affixes on it, blue's got 1 or 2, and white's got no affixes. Any of those, as long as they have forging potential, can be crafted on. Items always drop with a pseudo-random amount of forging potential, so there's ranges for each of those rarity classes, with exalts generally having the most, certainly having the highest potential amount of forging potential, followed by rares with the second most, etc. There's also a level requirement that plays a role in that, so things with higher level requirement can drop with higher forging potential. I don't remember exactly what the highest amount is, but it's quite high. You can get quite a bit of forging potential, especially on exalteds. Exalted and tier 5 affixes, though, that are on items that can be crafted on, cannot themselves be crafted on. At least you cannot increase their roll. I should probably put in here, there's an exception, not just for removal, but you can also do the rolling within the range, so you increase the range it has within its tier, but you can't increase the tier on it. You can't make it any higher. You can't change it. You can't use we call it the glyph of chaos to change what type of affix it is. Those are locked in. Every other affix on that item, though, can be. As long as it's not a tier 5, not a tier 6, tier 7, you can craft on it. You cannot craft on idols, and you cannot craft blessings. Blessings don't even really make much sense to me, but you can't. Idols, you can't change anything about them. You can't change the affixes. There's no additional tiers to add. You can't change the roll ones. There's nothing you can do on idols right now. Legendaries are something else you can craft. It's not technically the crafting system. Like when we generally talk about crafting, we're talking about this window here with the forge, where you put an item in, you get a bunch of options. Legendaries are a little different, but they're technically a kind of crafting. They're just not that kind. But what you do with legendaries, we talked about this in the gearing section, is if you have legendary potential, you can combine it with exalted item to form a legendary. So uniques, technically, with legendary potential, there is a form of crafting that can also occur to them, but it's not the typical kind from that forge panel. Okay, we've mentioned forging potential, which is what you need in order to do crafting. So let's talk about exactly what that is and how it works. So every craft costs a range of forging potential. It's always from 1 to something larger than 1. How much it is, it depends a lot on the craft. There's a variety of things that affect it, but usually the tiers. When it reaches 0 FP, the item reaches 0 FP, forging potential, the item can no longer be crafted on. So you have as many crafts as you have forging potential, and how much that is it dependent on a number of factors, including luck. So you can see this item here has 23 forging potential. This Rogue's Brigandine armor, not the Exsanguinous. The Exsanguinous what I'm wearing. The Brigandine armor in my inventory, though, has 23 forging potential. The Gorgon Scale coat here has 25 forging potential. And this Exile coat did really well and has 43 forging potential. Let's look at some other items down here. This one's actually been crafted on already, still has 34 potential. I don't think I've crafted on these. 32, 36. You can see a wide range of things in here. I'd show you some yellows or whites. I don't think I have any in my inventory right now. They generally be lower, but that's the number you're going to be working with. And what you do is you put it in here, and then anything you might do to it is going to cost forging potential as a range. So if we want to increase this from tier 2 to tier 3, this health here, it's going to cost me 1 to 12 forging potential. If I'm going to do this one here, it's 1 to 10. These lower tier ones are a little bit easier. This dodge rating here is 1 to 18. And there are things we can do to modify that somewhat, but those are the baseline numbers. We can also do other things to this that will cost different amounts. Like if I want to do a removal, it's 1 to 25. Discovery actually costs nothing. Rune of Refinement, 1 to 15. Shattering doesn't cost anything either. Ascendance doesn't cost anything. Shaping costs 1 to 25, etc. So you can see all these things have different forging potential costs related to them. And that's determined by the tier affix being crafted on and the rune being used. I have examples in here, but I also just showed you some. So we'll just skip that. But yeah, there's a number of things that could... There's a number of different... outcomes of forging potential that you can get here, and the only thing that is determined is the range that you start with. Crafting also does skew toward the lower potential use, though, so this is a nice thing. So when you see 1 to 18 on an item, right, you see it costs 1 to 18. Doesn't mean the average is 9. Not the middle. I think it's 9.5 technically, but it's not the middle number. That is your average. Your average is actually lower than that. Exactly how lower, we don't know. We don't have the specifics on that, but it's not 9. It's something like 7 or 6 or something along those lines. That's good for us, right? That means we can actually do more crafts than we think we can. We can also avoid using any potential. It is possible to not use any potential at all through 2 ways. First off is through a critical success. So every craft you do has a chance to critically success, which will A, cause the craft not to cost any forging potential, but also B, randomly upgrade a tier of one of the affixes on the item, which can be it can be an affix you're crafting on. It can be an affix that you're not crafting on, as long as it's not a tier 5 or higher. So if I put this in here and I upgraded this one here, there's a chance that it will critically success, which means it won't cost 1 to 12 forging potential, it'll cost 0. And then this could go to either from tier 2 to tier 4 because you get the extra one, or it could also go from tier 3 and then this goes to tier 4. It could go from tier 3 and this goes to tier 2. The only thing it can't affect is the increased damage of skills used by shadows because that's already tier 5. Okay, the other thing we can do to avoid using any potential is a Rune of Hope. That is here, and we will talk about this a little bit more in detail. But this gives you a 25% chance that your craft will cost you no forging potential. And this is independent of critical success. So critical success plus Glyph of Hope combined can give you well more than 25% chance that you will not use any forging potential on a craft. That's very good and exciting when it happens, especially if it happens multiple times in a row. It's very nice because it's like, this is going to craft really well. Okay, let's move on to how crafting operates. We already talked about this a little bit, so let's go into more detail about it. Crafting is a pseudo-deterministic system. This is different than some other games, like PoE generally is not considered a pseudo-deterministic system. And what that means is you can choose what affixes to put on items if they don't already exist. You can choose what to upgrade if it already does, so I can guarantee that I will upgrade this health here. If I choose this, I'll guarantee to upgrade it. If I had an item that doesn't have 4 affixes on it, do I have one in it? Here we go. And I click this, I can guarantee an affix that's going to go on it. I can, if I want strength, I can absolutely put it on there, and it will happen, guaranteed, as long as I have forging potential. Nothing can happen to prevent that from occurring. So that is what makes it pseudo-deterministic. That does not mean that it is a complete deterministic system. It is very much not that. There are aspects of it that are not deterministic. We've already talked about roll range of forging potential, etc. But there's a number of things in here that will give you a variety of outcomes and give you some RNG. So rolls within are an example of that. Like you upgrade from tier 2 to tier 3. Tier 3 has a roll range. We can see roll ranges just by doing alt on an item. So you see, like, for example, the physical resistance exalted here is a roll range of 61% to 75%. So when you upgrade up, so let's say we upgraded at tier 4 armor to tier 5, we are not guaranteed to get the highest roll range roll of that armor. We could get the worst roll of the armor. We could get something mid. They're all potential outcomes. Removing affixes is also random. We're going to talk more about these different crafting materials in a little bit, but removing affixes is something we said we can do, and it's like if we wanted to, on this item, use a rune removal, it has a chance, a chance to take off any of these 3, and it is equal. Yeah, it is an equal chance on all 3 of these. So we could get the throwing attack speed, you could get the phys res, could get the armor. We don't know until we do it. Glyph of Chaos is also random. Let's put that back in there. Glyph of Chaos is an item that allows us to, instead of upgrading the tier of this, we both upgrade the tier of it, and we change the affix. So this would change from armor to something else. But what it is, we don't know. It does tend to skew towards rare affixes when they exist on a particular affix that you're working on. As long as there's a rare affixes in the pool, there's a higher chance those will happen. But outside of that, we have no control over what it's going to choose. It could be what we want. Chances are it's not what we want, because there are more affixes that we don't want than we do. But that's the chance you take when you use a Glyph of Chaos. Changing an implicit is also random. So we can change the implicit rolls on something like that. Actually, let's just take this out and we're going to actually do one craft here. So we have implicit roll here of, that's 32 to 44, and we have a 38. The armor is already 204 and guaranteed to be 204. We could do what's called a rune of shaping, and we could change the implicits. We're at 38 now, we shape it, and now we're at 35. Well, we lost. We got worse. So that's random. We can't guarantee we're going to get better on that. Also, how much forging potential use per craft is semi-random. We talked about this in the last slide. You could use none. You could actually get 2 upgrades and cost none, or you could use the maximum amount possible and cry a little bit because you know you're forging or that crafting on that item is probably not going to go very well, but it can happen. All right, so we've talked a lot about what crafting can do and generally how it works. Let's now talk about how you craft. You probably already see me kind of doing things, so you have a general idea. We'll go through step by step, and then we'll talk about the different crafting materials that you have to work with. Okay, so to get into this forge, you press F. F gets you into the forge, easy. From there, you have a number of things to do. Let's just reset this, all right? So this is what you're going to see when you start. Just this open UI for the forge, nothing happening. We put an item in there. Let's put this one in. And we get a number of options. So these are related to prefixes and suffixes. On the left here, we got our prefixes. The right, we have our suffixes. Of course, if an item doesn't have all of those, you will have an open space. We had this item here that's only got 3. You see the open space here where we can choose whatever we want as far as an affix goes. If it's got 4, then we'll see all 4 in there. So the arrow here allows us to upgrade that affix. This allows us to use the affix chart, or we can use a Glyph of Chaos, which won't actually use the affix. Well, it does actually use, it does use the affix chart, but it'll change the affix. We can upgrade, we can chaos. We have those options available to, or we can do removal. Basically just selects that affix as the one that we're going to be crafting on. So we choose any of these, prefix, suffix, and then we can choose from there both glyphs and runes to put in there, which are the modifying crafting materials that we're going to talk about a little bit. If we want to go in here and put a glyph of hope in there, we can do that. And if we also wanted to put in a rune removal, we can do that. And that is how we set up our craft. And then from there, this button allows us to actually accomplish the craft. So if we did, let's just do a elemental resist. We're going to use a glyph of hope to try to make it a little bit easier. We're not going to use any runes, and we're just going to click upgrade fix. And there we go. We have a tier 2 now, and it cost us nothing. Awesome. Look at that. Glyph of hope reserved forging potential. So didn't cost us any forging potential. We're lucky. Okay, let's see. Anything else that we missed on here? Nope. Looks like we got everything. Excellent. Okay. This is more or less the last section of crafting. We got one other one after this, but this is where we're gonna talk about all the different crafting materials that we have to work with, so you know all the tools at your disposal. And the first thing we need to talk about is shards. Shards are kind of like the most basic building block of crafting. You need it for most crafts that you're gonna do, if not, yeah, most crafts, not every craft, but most crafts need this. So it's a crafting material that determines the type of affix that's being crafted on. For example, when we did the elemental resistance one, we needed an elemental affix shard in our inventory in order to do that. Let's see here. You can see right here, this is our crafting inventory. And we can see just how many elemental resistance shards I have, which is 736. So I have plenty of those. As long as I have these, I can do the crafts on that elemental resistance affix. I have ones for all of these too, so I'm good to go. I can do all the crafting on this. If you don't have it though, you won't be able to craft on that affix until you acquire one. So a very important part of the crafting process. You're going to need these. You're going to need them for any affix that you might come across. Even if it's not affixes you want, you're going to want them because if you're trying to roll off of that, seal it away, whatever it might be, you have to have a shard to do that. So you're going to be trying to acquire these things, even for affixes that you don't want to necessarily use, because you're going to need to use them anyway to get to what you want. You can acquire these shards in 3 ways. First off, is they just drop in the world. You kill an enemy, a bunch of shards drop. You go pick them up, and you've got some extra shards. You can also use a shattering rune on an item with desired affixes. We'll go ahead and do that. So let's take this item here. It's got some nice affixes on it. It's got Fizz Pen with Shadow Daggers here, and bleed chance per equipped sword. Those are nice rare affixes that are kind of hard to find. We hit this rune of shattering here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to see a list of things that we get. Every tier of affix we have on here is a chance that we will get it. We're guaranteed 1 affix. We're not guaranteed any more than that, but the more affixed tiers we have, the more we should get. So we shatter it, and we got 1 Fizz Pen, 1 bleed chance, and 2 elemental resist. Not very good, but we got 4 total affix shards. So that's one option. A pretty good option if you're just trying to generally acquire shards, especially early in your gameplay or early in a cycle. There are versions of seasons or leagues. This is a pretty good option for that. However, if you really need a particular kind of shard, you've been farming for it, you find an item that's got it, it's not an item you want to use, but you need those shards for crafting on something else, you can use a rune of removal. Rune of removal guarantees that the shard number is equivalent to the tier of the affix removed. So if you have a tier 5 Fizz Pen with Shadow Daggers on there, use your rune of removal, and it actually removes that affix. It has to remove the affix itself, but if it does remove that affix, you get all 5, guaranteed. You'll get all 5 on that. What affix it removes is random though, but we can do some things to improve our chances. For example, let's see here. Let's take this item. This has got 2 rare affixes on it. Chance to gain Dust Shroud when you use a melee attack that hits, and chance to lead on bow hit. And we're going to use a rune removal on it. And we're also going to use a Glyph of Hope, because that gives us a 25% chance of this removal costing no forging potential. Otherwise, it's going to be anywhere from 1 to 25. And we have 43 forging potential to work with. So we're going to try to target these 2. If we get this one, we get all 3 of these shards because we have a tier 3. If we get this one, we get 2. We'll go ahead. And it costs us a full 17, but we did get one of those. So we got 2 chance to bleed. We still want this one, so we're going to keep going. No luck, we didn't get that, and it costs us a lot of fortune potential, so we're running out of options here. We have 2 left though, so it's a 50% chance that we're gonna nail this Dust Shroud, but only 3 fortune potential. Let's see what happens. And we got it. Excellent. So we ended up getting all we wanted here. If we would have used a shattering, we almost certainly would not have gotten all 5 of those. It's very rare to get that many. In this case, we did. And as a added bonus, even when you run out of forging potential, there is one craft you still can do, which is a shattering. So if it happened to be the case that we didn't get the Dust Shroud one here, we could still shatter it and get some shards back. So we got 1 Fizz Res shard from doing the shattering. We actually end up with only one of the tiers of that item not being turned into a shard. So we did pretty good there. Okay. Shards vary in rarity. As we were talking about, there's some rare shards that we were just trying to get off of those items, and some are difficult to acquire. So this is a strong method for getting those when you need them, when you're going to need a lot of them if you're going to do some high-level crafting. Okay, moving on from shards, though, into runes, and then we'll talk about glyphs after that. So runes are this part of your crafting, of your forge. There are, as you see, a number of them. First off, let's talk about how they drop. So these only drop in the world, except for shattering runes, which you can actually buy from the vendor for 2,000 gold. They, of course, have to have inventory, and their inventory changes every 15 minutes on online. But this is a way to acquire shattering runes for pretty cheap early game. You cannot trade any crafting materials. So even if you're playing Merchant's Guild at 1.0, you will not be able to trade these. So you are mostly acquiring all of your crafting materials, except for shards. Shards are an exception throughout the world. Shards, you can buy items that have them on them, and then removal or use shattering to try and get them. But everything else here, got to play the game. Can't use the market to get them. Okay, rune of shatterings we already talked about, and we also talked about rune removal. So I'm going to go ahead and skip over these parts of it. Rune of refinement. This re-rolls affixes within its tiers. So if we put in this item, we only have 19 forging potential left in the stuff I brought out for this. We have to get some more. That's okay. And we use a rune of refinement right here. Use our hope just to try to save us some stuff. Okay, so we've got here's our roll ranges. 124 could go to 150. 11 could go to 12. 63 could go to 72. 33 to 38. If we want to max out, those would be like we got lucky. We'll go ahead and refine. Cost us 8 forging potential. And we got really bad on the first one, the same on the second, perfect on the third, and worse on the fourth. So all RNG. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. That's rune refinement, pretty easy. Rune removal, we just talked about that a lot. The other use case for this, I showed you guys how to use it to acquire materials, but if you want to really risk trying to take, especially if you have like a tier 5 affix that's really bad on an item that would otherwise be good, you can use a rune removal and just hope it targets that. This is also potentially a way that you'll effectively destroy an item, because if it's got a special affix like a tier 6 or tier 7 on it, it could target that and you lose it. But it's a chance you can take. You can rune removal your way out of a tier 5 if you think there's a chance that you can actually use that item. Of course, you can do it for lower tiers as well, but you also have chaos available to you, and another one that we'll talk about, another glyph we'll talk about here in a bit. Rune of Discovery, let's move on to that one. This is one of my favorite for early game. I love Rune of Discovery for early game, campaign, early monolith. It adds a random tier 1 affix to all empty affix slots on an item, and it doesn't cost forging potential. So early on, you probably don't have many affixes, you don't have many glyph of hopes, you don't have things with high forging potential, and so trying to craft specific things on them can be a lot more challenging, and there's a lot more things that are valuable to you, like all your resistances are really valuable, so especially if you have open suffix slots, using a rune of discovery can get you a lot farther than trying to craft on your own without having many shards and all the other stuff I mentioned. So I love these for early to mid game. I think these are actually underrated. Rune of shaping randomly re-rolls implicits on an item. So we did show this one already. This is the implicit part is for this item, armor and fizz res. That's what we're talking about. This will re-roll those. So if you don't have a very good roll like this one, you can try to get that roll to be higher and make the item even better. Rune of Ascendance is a special one. We'll show this one. This changes an item to a unique of that type. It's determined by the base type, not the specific item. So for example, we've got a chest armor in here, and we're going to use an Ascendance on it. And this is going to change it to a unique, and it can change it to any unique body armor. that is not, or that drops randomly in the world. So boss specific body armor wouldn't count, but as long as it drops in the world randomly, as you can find it in a cache or off of an enemy, etc., then it can also be acquired through the Rune of Ascendance. So we'll go ahead and ascend, and we got ourselves some Prism Wraps. Those are pretty nice. Decent rolls on those. So that's another way to target farm uniques. It's a pretty good option, especially if you have a lot of them. Then Rune of Creation is a very rare and very interesting crafting material that duplicates the item, but also reduces the forging potential to 0, and you must have forging potential to use it. There are a couple of clear use cases for this. So the first clear use case is, let's say you have an absolutely amazing ring, just amazing, and you need the affixes for both of your rings. This is fairly rare. Usually people tend to have like different prefixes, or at least different suffixes. But let's say it's really great if you had it on both rings. Rune of Creation, once you're done all your crafting, now you have 2 of them, you can wear them both. The more likely use case, that actually could also work for weapons if you're dual wielding, and that's probably a more likely use case than rings. But even more likely than that is taking exalted items that you're going to turn into legendaries. Okay, there's 2 reasons that you would use a Rune of Creation in that scenario. The first one is you've got an amazing item for making legendaries. Let's say you have an axe that just rolled really, really well. It's got a tier 7 melee crit, and that's what you need. And then all the other affixes are tier 5s that are the exact right ones that you would take in order to put it into making a legendary. You can Rune of Creation that, make a copy in case the first one doesn't go well. Because remember, unless you have 4 legendary potential on unique, which we'll talk this also a bit more in a minute, you're not going to get all the affixes, and what you get is random. So if you have a 1 LP or a 2 LP, you're going to get 1 or 2 affixes, and maybe there are certain affixes that are way higher value than ours is usually is the case. There's ones you really, really want, like that tier 7 melee critical strike chance is really what you want out of this, and you fail to get it. Well, if you have a Rune of Creation and you use it on it, now all you need to do is acquire another unique with LP, which, you know, all you need to do, it's generally pretty challenging to do that, but at least you have the Exalted still. The Exalted is there for you to try again as soon as you acquire the unique that you need. Another case for it is you have an amazing Exalted and you have a unique that you want to put into, but the Exalted itself is really, really good and you want to use it. So you want to use this in a legendary craft, but you don't want to lose the item itself. Like, this is like, you know, rings is another example of where this would happen a lot, but it really can happen anywhere, especially if you play multiple builds. So you have this amazing ring, you want to slam it into a legendary, but you really don't want to lose the ring itself. Rune of Creation, there you go. Now you have the ring, and you can slam another one into a unique, and you don't lose anything in the process. So Rune of Creation is pretty cool. Okay, let's move on to glyphs. These are a sort of support item. They're very valuable for high-level crafts. Some of them are absolutely required to make best-in-slot items. True best-in-slot in this game, which is effectively impossible, but even before that, just best-in-slot with all the right affixes on them, and all the highest tiers. And they only drop in the world. You can't buy or trade these, just like the other ones. That's true of all these crafting materials, except for shards, technically, although you can't trade them directly. You can trade them indirectly through items. And they can be used with shards or runes. You can combine them with those. So let's go through them. We already talked about at least 2 of these. Glyph of Hope, the 25% chance that a craft will cost no forging potential. This is a staple item. You're going to want a lot of these. You're going to want so many of these. Then Glyph of Chaos, which is the one that upgrades the affix to the next tier and also changes it to a random affix, but only affixes that can roll in that slot in that item. So you can't get something that doesn't normally roll in that slot because using Chaos, it's going to be one of the things in the pool of that affix. So a suffix will only get suffixes, etc. Rings will only get ring affixes. The Glyph of Chaos is used a lot for, this isn't an amazing item right now, but if I happen to get lucky, it could be. Just basically taking a shot, kind of like a gamble. If it doesn't work out, no harm, no foul. The item wasn't good enough to begin with, but it was worth taking a shot. I do this quite a bit and actually get lucky more often than I would think. I've made some really great items because of the Glyph of Chaos, so this is something I use quite a bit. Glyph of Order upgrades the affix to the next tier while maintaining the roll within its range. So, for example, you have a tier 4 of an item and it's a perfect roll. Cannot be any better. If you use the regular upgrading method without a Gorder, so let's say you use a Hope, there's no guarantee it's going to re-roll within the new range. So tier 5 will have a different re-roll on it. It could roll minimum, it could roll average, it could roll perfect, but it probably won't. Well, if you use a Glyph of Order, you lose out on the 25% chance to craft will cost no fortune potential, but you're guaranteed to maintain the perfect roll on it. So this can have some value. Glyph of Despair is a very cool and kind of unique sort of crafting material. What this does is it has a chance to seal the affix into a 5th affix slot instead of upgrading it. So on an affix slot that doesn't exist otherwise on the item. We can actually, ooh, that's kind of hard. Let's see. Do I have anything where I can show that? I guarantee you I do, because this one's a really cool craft. I want to show you how it works. I just need something with like a lower. Here we go. Okay, so let's take this item. I don't know if I can craft this because it is not for me. Yeah, I can, good. So we have this Primalist Attuned Nomad Garb of Sparks. It's got 3 affixes on it. Okay, and then we have 1 open slot. And what I can do, let's say, let's just go do this. Let's just put 4 on it, okay? Let's just to make this a little bit simpler. We have these 4 affixes on it. Let's say that attunement, aspect of the links, and the armor, reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes are all exactly what I want, right? I love those affixes, but I don't love lightning resistance. But I don't hate it. It's not terrible. Maybe it is. It doesn't matter, but I don't want it there. I want something else. I have a couple of options. You already know 2 of them. I can use a Chaos here, right? I can go Glyph of Chaos, upgrade to tier 3, have a random reroll of what it is, and hope that I get what I want. Pretty low chances, but really high upside if I get it, because I also upgraded it. I can removal, and can take a shot that it's going to remove this one. It's going to cost me fortune potential, and I have a 25% chance because I have 4 affixes I'm going to get it. Not great odds. Not great odds and probably pretty expensive. Or I can use a Glyph of Despair. And what this will do is it'll give me a shot at rolling this into a 5th affix slot. Now, it's not guaranteed. I should get that out of here. It's not guaranteed. But the lower the tier is, the better the chance. And it's a much better chance on exalted items. This is an exalted item, and it's a tier 2. So I have a pretty good shot at getting this. Let's try. I'm going to go ahead and roll it. And I got it. Excellent. So now you can see I've sealed this over into its own 5th slot, and you can see it's got a different color on there. And I've opened up this space. So now let's say increased health is what I actually wanted. Oops. Increased health is what I actually want here. Now I can go ahead and I can craft that in. Boom, done. Now I've got 5. That's how you get 5 through the Glyph of Despair. Now there are some restrictions to this item that we need to talk about. So it cannot be a tier 5, tier 6, or tier 7. Which we already knew that, right? Because we can't really craft that stuff. I mean, you can technically with the removal, but you cannot seal a tier 5, tier 6, or tier 7. With one exception that we'll talk about later, but for what we're doing here, and with Glyph of Despair specifically, we definitely cannot ever seal a tier 5, 6, or 7 using a Glyph of Despair. So we can only do 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as we talked about, the odds are lower the higher it is. Tier 4s are pretty unlikely to actually seal. And if you don't seal it, it does also upgrade. It will upgrade that in that case into the next tier. It upgrades anyway. And so you won't have any more shots at it. So the higher the tier, the bigger the risk that you're not going to be able to actually continue and actually seal it off. But that's the gamble you take. So Glyph of Despairs are very cool, very high level crafting materials, really important for endgame best in slot gearing. And that's how you use it. Okay, experimental affixes. So this is a new affix that was added the patch before 1.0. Let's go ahead and grab one so we can see how it works. Let's see, do I have anything that's not especially good? This is a tier 2, perfect. Okay, so this is an experimental affix. This one here is the experimental, the one in blue, not the one in purple. 11% of armor mitigation also applies to damage over time, and plus 49 armor. So there are 2 ways we can craft on that affix. Well, actually, there's one way we can craft on that affix specifically, and there's another way that we can work with experimental affixes. They're the only two ways you can work with experimental affixes. You can work with all of the other affixes on this item. I can increase minion health. I can increase endurance. This is a tier 7, so I can't. But if it were not, I'd be able to. But this only has two things we can do. So the first thing that we can do is actually it is research, right? Yes, it's research. We can do a rune of research. What this is going to do is it's going to act like the glyph of despair. And it's going to seal that affix. Now, the difference between it and the glyph of despair is this one's guaranteed. So you will always seal that. In fact, you know what? This is a tier 2. Let's go ahead and grab a higher tier 1 just to show what we mean by that. Experimental. There's a tier 5. We could use that one. I bet you I've got one. I bet you I've got an exalted version somewhere in here. There's a tier 6. Okay, let's take this tier 6 here. So this is an exalted experimental affix. We could not do this on a regular affix, the glyph of despair. It would not work. However, with the rune of research, we go ahead and put that on, and it immediately puts it into a sealed slot. Guaranteed every single time. The tier 7 do the same thing. That's very powerful. If you have an item that wants to have an experimental affix on it, being able to guarantee that you'll seal that away gives you so much power on that item. Experimental affixes, by the way, only go to belts, gloves, and boots, so it's not every item that can do this. But for the items that can, it's really powerful. The other thing we can do is take this item here. All right, we've got these two prefixes. And they're also experimentals always prefix, so that'll never change. We can take a glyph of insight, and we can turn one of these into experimental. Oh, that one can't be experimental for some reason. Let's see here. Right, it's not glove boot. I just told you guys it's glove boots, belts, and then I tried to put in a body armor. What am I doing? All right, let's, here we go. This one. Okay, so we use, oh, no forging potential. I will find one. I will find one that works. You got forging potential? You got forging potential. Okay. You don't have anything open. I will find one. Let's see. Boots. I mean, let's just go with a yellow if we can. Here we go. This has got tier 3. No forging potential. There we go. There's our guy. Okay. So what we can do is we can take this glyph of insight, and we're going to upgrade this throwing damage, and it's going to turn it into experimental. There it is. Now it's experimental ward on kill. So this is a way to, like, force, effectively, an experimental affix on an item that doesn't otherwise have it. So this one now has it. It's good to go. And if we wanted to, we could even go ahead and take our rune of research, and we could seal it away. And we only have one forging potential now, but we can do that. Downsides of this. The downsides of using the glyph of insight. It has... How do I want to word this? Well, let's just use it on here. The rules for this are complicated and obtuse. So the way that it chooses what affix, what tier affix you're going to get, have to do with the item itself. And the rules behind that are very convoluted, very complex, and ultimately make it extremely difficult that you would be able to get an item that's good enough to get a really high tier affix on an item, making this generally not worth it. Like right now, the general consensus is this is not worth doing. Maybe early on in the game, if you really need an experimental affix, which doesn't really exist right now, but if you really need one early in the game, then you would do something like this if you had a glyph of insight. But the rune of research is very worth it. That's a really good item, and you should definitely do that. Okay, legendaries. This should be the last topic. Uniques with legendary potential can be combined with an exalted to make a legendary. So you can have up to 4 affixes from the legendary determined by how much legendary potential it has. So let's look at a legendary real quick. Right, that can be a legendary. I bet you have someone here. Calamity, it's got 1 LP, yeah? So we can do with this, we can turn this, not crafting stuff, we could turn this into a legendary by combining this with a helmet that is exalted and has 4 affixes. We go to the Temporal Sanctum, we kill Jelbro, the boss, at the end of it. We go into the next room, and there is a Eternity, it's called Eternity Cache. You click on it when you are in the, I think it's Divine Era. There's 2 eras. One's Ruined Era, and the other era, I think, is Divine. You put both items in there, you switch timelines, which is a dungeon mechanic, and it will combine the 2, and it will give you one of the affixes on the exalted. It could be any of those 4 affixes. It can't be a sealed one, but it can be any of the other 4 affixes that are on the item. If this is a 2 legendary potential, it would take 2 affixes off, 3 affixes, and 4 it would take all 4 affixes. The exalted can be crafted on before you combine them, so you can make a really amazing exalted item to combine that's got awesome affixes. You can't do anything with the unique itself, but you can with the exalted. Sealed affixes that have been mentioned do not count, cannot be added to the legendary, which is also nice because if there's an affix on there that you really don't want, you can seal it away and then you can craft on it so that you can make a better item for your legendary crafting. And if class-specific affixes are chosen, the legendary becomes class-specific. So we got like Fizz Pen with Shadow Daggers, which is a rogue-specific, and you put it on a unique helmet that is otherwise not rogue-specific. It's a generic helmet. It now becomes rogue-specific. Okay. We already mentioned legendaries made in 10 per second. So this is the last part of it here. We have basic crafting strategies. This is very basic. This is not advanced stuff. I'll make another video outside of LA University for that. But this is just to get you going, give you some general ideas of how to improve your crafting experience early on. This one we actually already mentioned, how to gain shards. Use the rune of removal on items with affixes you really want. So rare affixes. You can use multiple removals on the item to ensure you get the right ones. And then you can shatter the item when you're just trying to increase your affix pool. Very, very simple, but powerful method. So many players do not use removal when they first start playing the game. They just use shattering and they struggle to get the affixes they need. And if they just use removals, they would have such an easier time. So this is a really important tip. Please use your removals for this method. Okay. Crafting during campaign is something also that we can gain some power from. I already mentioned use Rune of Discovery this way. So you use Discovery on open affixes when you don't need a specific affix. It saves you forging potential. It saves you crafting materials. Except for the Discovery, it's all it costs you. And you get effectively free power from it. Use Chaos to reroll your bad affixes. And then use Hope on everything else. It's a very basic but easy to follow strategy. You don't like the affixes, use your Chaos to try to get better affixes. You have open slots, use Discovery. Unless it's like a really important thing that you really need a specific affix, then go ahead. But if you don't need a specific one, you just have some open slots, you want some more power, Discovery. And then always use Hope when you have it. If the item is something you're going to keep for a while and you don't have any Glyph of Hopes, wait to craft on it. If it's not a super important item and you're going to replace it fairly soon, then you can just go ahead and craft on it anyway. Okay, that covers crafting. It was quite a long video, but I think there's a lot of good information here, so I hope you agree. I hope you have a great time in Last Epoch. We'll have the next video out here real soon on the next topic, which is actually, I believe, going to be defense. So hope you check that one out. It's going to be a lot of good stuff in there too. Thanks again for watching. Have a great time in Last Epoch, and I'll see you all again real soon.